What is the core fear? The root fear of someone who thinks of himself as a separate being. What actually is fear? Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Sebastian. So there's different types of fear. There's fear that is something that's natural to the human body. So fear can be a response to a tiger chasing it, or a dog chasing it, or falling off the bike. Then there can be conditioned fears. So if you've had a car accident, then maybe every time when you see the car, there will be conditioned fear that comes up. Then there is this other fear, this existential fear, where you believe that all that conditioning and habits and ideas belong to you and make a separate entity that's experiencing this life. And this is you could call it like an existential fear, that you believe that who you are is the person that's afraid of the car, or is the person that's afraid of the dog. And this is what I define the differences between pain and suffering. And suffering isn't even conditioned fears. The body's always going to have conditioned fears. It's always going to learn things and be afraid of them. It might even be, could be afraid of all types of things that it's been hurt by in the past. The body associates, the thinking associates. But it's this energy that claims all of that into being a separate entity. And that separate entity really believes it's alive. And when it's waking up, that separate entity is coming and going. Sometimes it believes it's more real and sometimes less. And it sort of pulsates. And when it's less strong, it feels like happiness. And when it's really strong, you feel really depressed or contracted. And what keeps you in that expansion and contraction is old places in where you identify, and they're normally bound with old conditionings, so old traumas that are in the body, or old ways of being that are in the body, and there's more identification with that. There's more rejection of that. It's something maybe you don't want to face, or you don't want to feel, or you don't want to experience. So it's not that you have to let go of all your conditioning or all your traumas. It's the identity that's trying to get away from those traumas, and that identity is trying to live in time. It doesn't mean to, but it's trying to live in a timeline. It believes that it came into this room and it sat on the chair and that it's listening to Lisa. Now that sounds really abstract, that I'm saying that's a timeline, but that's not actually the reality. There is presence, there is life knowing itself. And then in that there's a character that walked into this room and sat down. But that character is not an experiencer, it is an experience. And that experience comes and goes. The self-identity is always holding on to it. So what I've come to do lately, because I realised there were parts of when I used to speak were really beautiful and really worked for people. But there were times when I felt like the way I spoke just added to people avoiding themselves. So what I do now is I try to point people more into stuck energy in their body. And it doesn't mean that that stuck energy has to go completely. It's just trying to loosen that identity, that separate entity that's trying to run away from it, or trying to find completion in it. So it believes I will be complete if I don't feel fear again, or it believes I'm incomplete because I feel fear. But really, there is no teacher outside of you, Sebastian. There isn't someone that's going to save you or help you or do anything. It seems like that relatively, like I'm pointing, but really, this is an investigation that Sebastian, the appearance, the illusory Sebastian, has to do, of going inward. And that doesn't mean don't go to teachers and don't listen to them, but what the person will keep trying to do is try to put the saviour outside of itself, rather than looking at where that longing comes from to be saved. So non-duality, speakers like me, what they're trying to do is trying to point you, you could say, in. that eventually gets deconstructed, the idea of inside and outside, that you're in relationship with anyone, but it's the easiest way for me to say it. So your longing comes up for something, and you follow that back to its source, because in the middle of that longing, is the amness, is the beingness, is the freedom. But the thinking is going out like a tentacle in time, trying to find it in time.